This review was made possible by contributions from viewers like you.
Hey guys, it's time to talk about something that probably would have made a bit more sense if we talked about it last year. Alice in Wonderland. I say it would have made more sense to talk about this last year since that's when Through the Looking Glass was released, but with all the fuss I was making about Batman v Superman during previous months, it was kind of unavoidable. And since I'm kind of running late with my big theme month anyway, I guess this is as good a time as any to talk about this block of reviews. Alice in Wonderland has been the subject of many adaptations and interpretations over the years, and we're going to look at just a sample of how this twisted little book has inspired so many storytellers over the years. Today we're starting off with Grimm Fairy Tales presents Alice in Wonderland One-Shot. Just rolls right off the tongue, don't it? Today's comic is brought to us by Zenescope, who at the time of this comic's publication were celebrating their 10th anniversary. Seeing as how this particular comic publisher is famous for only two things, their continued success is something of a mystery to me. Marvel and DC are bombarded with jeers and scoffs whenever they release material that's overly sexualized, while Zenescope has somehow thrived on this kind of artwork being their bread and butter. It's all the more head-tilting when you consider how many of their works involve sexual reimaginings of little girls. This comic's cover features a very grown-up, very filled-out Alice enjoying a spot of tea, at a tea party which doesn't look nearly as mad as it should. And aside from this other fellow I can't reveal just yet, the only other guest of the party is the White Rabbit, who is buck naked. And when the party is going in this direction, it's only fair to ask, "What's in the tea, Mr. Hatter?" The Mad Hatter himself is decidedly missing from this scene, but I'm not going to rule out the possibility that maybe he just drank something he wasn't supposed to, and now he's a teeny tiny Hatter under the hat. But now let's take a peek at the other prominent guest at this tea party. Pogo the Clown. Pogo the Clown! For those of you who are unfamiliar with this jolly fellow, John Wayne Gacy, the man behind the makeup, was responsible for 33 murders, all of them young men and teenage boys. Because this guy belongs in an Alice in Wonderland story, right? What next? A story about Snow White befriending Charles Manson? Actually, at least that would make some kind of sense, since Snow White actually was created by the Brothers Grimm. If you want to make an Alice comic, that's fine, but why put her under the Grimm's Fairy Tales line of books when she was created by Lewis Carroll? Since there are a ton of Alice comics made by Zenescope, the inside cover offers us a little supplemental reading to get us all caught up with the story. Alice Liddell befriends a boy during her imprisonment in Wonderland, but will the madness of the mysterious realm destroy them both, or will their strong bond keep them from losing their sanity? Enter a world unlike any you've seen before as Alice's adventures in Wonderland turn into her worst nightmares. That's not a backstory, that's the synopsis from the back of a DVD cover. And don't you feel so caught up after reading that little blurb of nothing? It captures the events of the past dozen or so Wonderland titles just perfectly. Our comic opens on Chicago, 1952, where we see little John Wayne Gacy being beaten by his father. Child abuse! Happy 10th anniversary, Zenescope! It would appear that John is afraid of two boogeymen in the closet who are going to get him if he goes to sleep. Daddy Gacy is pleased with the silence coming from John's room, since he believes that his beating him got him to go to sleep. Not exactly sure where said silence is coming from, since Tweedledee and Tweedledum crash into the room like they're the Kool-Aid Man. I didn't leave anything out here. Daddy Gacy says, "See? Not a sound." And then there's, "Oh yeah!" How is anyone not going to hear this? They find John hiding under his bed and try to eat him, and he makes a mad dash for the closet from whence they came. I wish I had a better understanding of the layout of this bedroom, because I have no idea if the door to the hallway is inaccessible. Is he running into the closet because he has no other means of escape, or because he's incredibly stupid? Within the closet, he finds a small clearing in a forest, where a cauldron of human soup is boiling away. You know, people love to really analyze and study what the inhabitants of Wonderland are supposed to be, what parallels to the real world they may have, that kind of thing. But how the hell do you read Tweedledee and Tweedledum and somehow end up with cannibals? Even if you ignore how unnecessarily gruesome this is, why are they so hungry for this kid when they've got an entire person already being prepared? Then the appropriately young Alice appears from out of nowhere and pushes over their stew before the Tweedles can put John into it. Instead of chasing after the kids as they run away, the Tweedles try to eat what they can before it goes bad. Convenient. She takes John to her home inside of a giant tree, because Alice is one of the lost boys. And John asks her where her parents are. The big green ugly says they sent me here because they didn't want me anymore, but I don't believe him. He always lies. Did you forget that you came here because you chased a white rabbit down a hole? Why didn't you just say that instead of mentioning the big green ugly? Said big green ugly shows up, and it's actually the Jabberwocky. Why does Alice call him the big green ugly instead of the Jabberwocky? She knows about the Jabberwocky because she read about it in a poem. Besides, this Jabberwocky is blue, not green. Anyway, the Jabberwocky tries to eat John, but he tastes hideous because he has the stink of madness. If madness has that bad of a taste, then how have you not starved to death in Wonderland? Everyone is mad here, otherwise they wouldn't have come. He looks inside of John's mind, because the Jabberwocky can do that, where we see a manifestation of his father beating him, mutilated animals, a freshly cooked corpse, and the Tweedles coming to get him. Go ahead and detect hints of madness from his abuse and torturing animals, but let's be fair, this other stuff is all on you guys. He senses that John is odd and he doesn't have many friends, and since Alice is odd herself, he wants John to keep her company. He makes John promise to come back to visit Alice if he's sent home, and he agrees. Why doesn't the Jabberwocky just keep John here? John wakes up in his bed as if nothing happened, which means that he's free to go back to his normal life of getting tormented by bullies. Come on, John, you know how to deal with bullies. Just yell at them really loud until they run away in embarrassment.
Leave us alone right now!
Actually, he beats the bully's face with a rock, and his blood splatters across John's face so that it looks like a big clown smile.
Harboard. Chomp.
John goes back to Wonderland via his dreams. Nice to see that he didn't need cannibalistic escorts this time. And he meets with Alice again. She talks about how she wants to go back to school and be a cheerleader, because cheerleaders were such a thing in 1865. And John talks about how he and this one friend of his do all kinds of fun things together. He continues seeing her for years, even to the point where he's old enough to have his first job, where he's apparently a mortuary janitor / grave robber. How charming. And he even gets married, with unsatisfying results. And while he's getting older, Alice hasn't aged a day. He goes on talking about his dabbling with young men in seedy hotels, since that's a perfectly acceptable topic of conversation to have with little girls, and how he began his new job as a clown. Okay, he has the basic look of Pogo the Clown, but why the solid blue jumpsuit and white face paint? Everyone knows the Pogo look, so much so that they associate it with Gacy's murders, even though he never committed any of his murders as the clown, ironically enough. Was Zenescope afraid that Gacy's family might sue them or something? After coming back and keeping her company for decades, John tells Alice that she's his best friend. To which Alice does not react in any way whatsoever. Okay. We cut to January 1972, where he picks up a young man at the bus station and offers him a ride. John offers him a job at his construction company, as well as a place to stay for the night, and he accepts, but then we cut back to John in Wonderland, looking for Alice. The Jabberwocky explains that Alice is back in the real world, and if he ever wants to see her again, he'll have to bring her back to Wonderland. No, that wouldn't be right. I won't do it.
Too late, boy. I've already chosen you as my instrument.
And John wakes up to find the man he picked up earlier slaughtered in his bed. That's right, It wasn't his abusive father or his confused sexual identity that turned him into a serial killer. It was the Jabberwocky who did it. What? So not only did John murder this poor kid in an amnesic blackout, but he somehow peeled off every bit of his skin except for under his hair. And the skin is nowhere in sight. Did John eat it? I think the comic is confusing John Wayne Gacy for Ed Gein. John is horrified by what he's done, and he blames the Jabberwocky for it. But the Jabberwocky, talking with him through the looking glass, insists that he did it all on his own. You just said that you were going to use John as your instrument. You can't pull this kind of crap on him.
Don't you remember? Don't you remember how soft his flesh was as you sunk the knife? How warm his blood felt on your skin? Don't you remember how alive you felt? Yes.
After he hides the body in the crawlspace under his house, we then cut to a montage of John gleefully murdering one poor kid after another. Oh, wait, we cut to him sitting in the beer tent at a carnival. One would think that the natural thing to see after he realizes how good it feels for him to kill would be him doing a lot more of it, but no, drinking himself into a stupor years later is fine. And again, we see him wearing the not Pogo costume. Why is this comic so afraid of showing Pogo the Clown when it has Pogo the Clown right here on the cover? He then spots who he thinks is Alice, but she doesn't recognize him.
Don't you remember me? It's JW!
John Walker? John Williams? Jehovah's Witness? Nobody introduces themselves like that! Of course, her boyfriend doesn't take kindly to this, and he shoves John away. Instead of reading the writing on the wall that is this girl's expression of extreme disapproval, John stalks them until later that evening, when they're having sex in the boyfriend's car. John stabs him in the back a bunch of times, and not Alice's face changes from horrified to just kind of put off, before John chloroforms her and takes her back to his house. She pleads with him to let her go, when the Jabberwocky appears in the mirror again. Naturally, she has no idea what the Flying Dutchman is going on, but it turns out that this actually is Alice, as the Jabberwocky triggers a flood of repressed memories of her time in Wonderland. And one of those memories was, again, the White Rabbit not wearing a waistcoat. What was the point in making him naked when it was the fact that the rabbit was wearing clothes and carrying a watch that was Alice's entire motivation for chasing him in the first place? John says that they can be together again when he takes her back into Wonderland, but she doesn't want to go back. She tries to reason with him that they can be together in the real world, since she's convinced that it was the Jabberwocky who made him commit his atrocities, and that he's really innocent. John has another way to solve the problem. Smash his way into Wonderland through the mirror, sure is a good thing that he knew he could do that, to confront the Jabberwocky head-on. The Jabberwocky explains that he really didn't have anything to do with John's murders. Then what was the point of you saying that you were going to make him your instrument? Then he sends him back to the real world just in time for the cops to show up at his house. Alice wanders home just in time to hear what happened on the radio. In other news today, a Norwood Park man has confessed to murdering 33 people and burying them in the crawlspace under his home. If true, the crimes would make him the most prolific serial killer in American history. His name is John Wayne Gacy.
Oh my god! You mean that guy who looks exactly like John Wayne Gacy has the same murderous history as John Wayne Gacy and dressed up like a clown like John Wayne Gacy was actually John Wayne Gacy?
Yeah, for some reason they wanted Gacy's identity to be this shocking twist, which is why we never see the name John Wayne Gacy until the last page of the comic. Sorry, but it doesn't make for a good mystery when you have Pogo the Clown right there on the cover! What was even the point of this comic? Zenescope is celebrating their 10th year of publishing comics by making a comic that has nothing to do with the other Wonderland books? Why? Why have John Wayne Gacy in this at all? Is the implication that other famous serial killers were brought into Wonderland at some point and were all controlled by the Jabberwocky? We never see Alice go back into Wonderland, and there's nothing here to suggest that she might in a later issue, so the Wonderland books are done? This is how the multi-titled Alice in Wonderland saga comes to a close? I don't get it. My final words for this comic? Off with its head! I'll see you later. That's interesting.